Hello, Lou Hamilton from Audible Elegance here in Cincinnati, Ohio. Today I want to talk about isolating a room from the rest of the environment. And I've seen some nice articles that are going to follow along with what we did, but there's something a little special that I'm going to have to put over here in the corner. We have two major rooms side by side, back to back, if you want to call it that, for audio and audio-video demonstrations. We can carry off demonstrations in both rooms at high volume without hearing the other room. And so how is that done? Well, sound transmission, if you have, let's say, a board, if it hits the board here, well, it's going to come through at a lower level, but it will come through. So the first thing you need to do is have two separate walls so that you do not have transmission between the walls. That's number one. This room has its wall completely separate mechanically from the next wall that's part of the other room. There are different things you can do at this point. This wall here, we'll use a different color just to kind of help you out. This wall here was first treated with a sound deadening board known as homosote, as was this board here. Then the drywall, 3/4 inch, was placed over it here, and the cavity in here was filled with fire retardant blow-in insulation, and not fiberglass. It's actually cotton, which makes it extremely dead. Now, the mistake then following after this that most people make is that they use a common HVAC duct to the rooms. And the problem is that if sound gets in the vent, it travels down and comes out of the other vent. So each room has its own separate HVAC supply line and HVAC return line. Now, the ductwork used for these is not metal, because if sound goes into a metal duct, it rattles around every which way. So these are actually tubular lines that are insulated so that you don't hear sound coming back. Now, how does sound come back? Well, this is the other mistake that happens in a lot of homes, and that is that their HVAC line goes back to the furnace. And depending upon the length of that line, what will happen is the sound from one room essentially gets shipped down, gets into the furnace, and comes back out. This is more common when you're talking about not ranch layouts, but when you're talking about 2 or 3 story homes, because it's just a common, tube at that point. So this is also a very common thing. Now, the last element of it, and you all experience this either with the air conditioning running or the heat in the wintertime, is that when the furnace kicks on, what you hear from the vents is a whoosh. And this is because the opening for which the air has to come through or return is actually making a sound getting through that grate. So if you're going to try to keep rooms small or quiet, then the size of the grate for the feed line also has to be greatly oversized. And that will keep the whoosh out of the environment. So this is how you essentially set things up if you want to do sound isolation. Now, in your home, this may not be an important one. This may be a family room or something like that, but you don't want to hear what's going on over here. The double wall construction is what's used. Now, some people take a little step further, which is kind of interesting. We didn't do it here because our floor is slab construction, so that'll take on a lot of things as well. But sometimes what you'll see are these little metal clips. They're kind of spring-loaded, so they actually are floating the wall. And we didn't go to that route because we were trying to maintain the rigidity of the room. It's easier to slow down a room by adding acoustical treatments than it is to try to make a very soft room hard. So we opted for this approach. The other thing that goes on when we start talking about the vertical is actually something you can do for yourself early on. Let's say you have an unfinished basement and you're thinking about finishing it off and put a high-end theater room or audio room in it, and you have small children. And the last thing you want is to disturb them with whatever's going on in the room. The good way of testing what's happening with the ductwork is simply go downstairs with a boom box and turn it on. And then go upstairs to the floors and listen to the grates and see whether you can hear that boom box. Because that boom box is significantly less acoustical power than a fully operating system. So then you've really got to go do your homework down in the basement to keep that sound getting to the furnace. Otherwise, up it goes. That is something that occasionally happens. The one that drives me nuts, and I'm very angry about it because a lot of people are being taken to the cleaners, is they have let's say a basement system, and the builder says, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to charge you buku bucks, and I'm going to put in a whole lot of Pink Panther fiberglass in the ceiling, and that'll keep the sound from getting through. The only way of responding to that is that's simply bullshit. Because here is the reason why, is their floor joists, okay, is what they attach the drywall to. There's no floating of the drywall, so the sound is going to go into the drywall, through the board, and upstairs to the floor. Insulation like this is also extremely ineffective against low frequency. It may dampen some, yeah, but low frequencies are just going to penetrate that on a heartbeat, because a bass note is, tens of feet long. So its waveform is just going to worm right through that. So that's some of the basic principles of what goes on. And some of this I learned at Baldwin Piano and working with the head of the Acoustical Society, of watching out for these things. Now, I mentioned a little thing up here, and a lot of people know of Jim Teal. A lot of people know of Kathy Gornick. But there was a third. His name was Tom Teal. Tom did all of the cabinet work for Teal Audio for many, many years. He was also responsible for personally selecting the veneers and matching them up. So a lot of people have appreciated the Teal woodworking, the book matching of the veneers on the back, so it just literally opens up their face mirror image of each other. Tom was also extremely knowledgeable about glues. So when we were building our walls, one of the first things he said not to use, which is what a lot of people use, is P200 adhesive. And the reason being is that P200 adhesive essentially breaks down, dries out. And what happens is those surfaces, they actually begin to rattle on their own. So he gave to us a very special formula of adhesives that were used within the manufacturing of Teal speakers. And he goes, this is what you use for adhesive. And that's how we did it. And 30 years later, that wall has no problems. So I have to thank Tom Teal, the hidden Teal of the family, so to speak, for additional insight as far as rigidity and construction. And, oh, by the way, a gazillion drywall screws went into this effort too. And in the high-end room, it's actually double layer, a 3/4 inch. So if you have a home that's being built with half-inch drywall in your sound room and the studs are, on center, it's just standard practice, you've got one magnificent large drum that's going to vibrate like the Dickens, and it's going to produce a tone that, unless you're aware that it's happening, it will drive you nuts trying to find it. So that's a little bit of room isolation, a little bit of sound isolation, a little bit of construction, all within a single package today. So I hope you appreciate it. For some, it'll be useful. For some, it's too late.